Before festival lanes, before opera stages, before moonlit fairgrounds and swirls of velvet, there was a child with a Barbie and a pair of scissors that didn't ask permission. At just 4 years old, Lelia Chamberlain turned drapes into a dress. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was hers. A spark lit, not for fashion, but for control, for identity, for voice.
I actually do remember doing that dress. The mind works in really weird ways. And my mom's drapes were down below the window, and I figured she'd never miss it, so I took a pair of scissors and I chopped them off, and I did a dirndl style little dress for Barbie, because Mom did things that she was very good at doing, and that is buying something and not all the parts. So I had a Barbie doll with no clothes, so we had to render that, and I chose to do it my way.
Her grandmother saw the flicker and fanned it. A designer for Dan River Mills, she sent packages of thread and imagination. No praise, no lectures, just quiet votes of confidence with every fabric bundle. She learned on an old knee-controlled machine. Tiptoes, trembling fingers, not a child's toy, but a tool of transformation. By 12 years old, she wasn't just learning on that machine, she was earning with it. Every hem, every alteration, every single commission became part of the way she supported herself. By 7th grade, she made her own outfits, bold, electric statements. Each hallway stair became a silent battleground. The red courage-inspired cape was her banner, rebellion in thread. At 16, she began formal voice training with John and Helga Bullock, paid for entirely by her sewing money. Her parents didn't cover it. They didn't even encourage it. But she believed in her voice enough to stitch her way into every lesson. She acted too, just 3 points shy of the thespian honors. A fact she didn't even know until the day they handed her the graduation gown. The whispers, they became stitches. Every insult threaded into armor. She didn't flinch. She stitched harder. Sewing and singing was already hand in glove, two crafts rising together. Every dollar she made at the machine moved her one step closer to the conservatory that would come next. From Barbie drapes to hallway runways, she wasn't just stitching dresses, she was threading identity, one seam at a time. And the girl behind the needle was no longer hiding. She was just getting started.
I started dressing my own weird way actually long before that, because my mother gave me my sister's hand-me-downs that never fit, so therefore I had to come up with my own. And the many boxes of fabric my grandmother sent to me became things I wore and turned into things to wear to school, which is why I identify in my own weird way to Dolly Parton's coat of many colors, because I dressed like Dolly in that one way. I came up with some stuff that, oh my God, you would have gone, nobody would be caught dead in that. But I also mastered things like learning how to put in sleeves, setting in all kinds of different things that became normal, functional, and in fact made my clothes for real to wear to school by the time I was in junior high. And I never wore stuff that my mother went and picked out at what was Macy's, or at that time it was Heck Company, the May Company, long ago, far away, showing my age. But I wore my own stuff. Yes, I got made fun of because I was different, but different to me was cool. And my idol at that time was Bonnie Raitt, and her album where she's reclined on a bench and she's wearing a pair of brown lace-up boots that I had to have those boots. And I worked my butt off with sewing money and went to Georgetown Leather Design and bought those boots and wore them with tight jeans with patches all over them, and I looked like a cool hippie, and I looked like a hippie with money. And we looked really, really neat, and it became my identity right then and there, and went on to the other stuff. We also, in high school, built costumes for every musical George C. Marshall's high school ever did. And this is how we wound up finding out the thespian stuff, because I never knew, but I did Hello Dolly, we did Showboat, about 5 or 6 other ones, Guys and Dolls. I mean, literally, every year they did something. And who did they come to? Because my next door neighbor was a thespian and says, "Oh, I know Lisa's. She'll take care of that." And by damn, there we went. But my way of how I learned to do things was but nowhere near what we became. But that was my training ground.
When Lelia Chamberlain stepped onto the open stage, her childhood defiance transformed into grand artistry. Her garments no longer simply clothed, they embodied entire worlds. Every stitch became song, every seam, a phrase, and an aria of silk and flame. What began as a childhood spark had become a disciplined craft, strong enough to open the doors of a world she once only imagined.
My first year of college was actually at Virginia Commonwealth University, not the conservatory, but I was a music major at VCU. And I wanted better, for lack of putting it in a better way. And I did, at that time, what was my research, and I got accepted anywhere I wanted. However, I noticed that BCM had a better voice curriculum and had better faculty. So I said, that's where I want to go, and by damn, we got there. And my major draw was John Moriarty, because he was All That in a Bag of Chips with Wolf Trap Opera and several other different things. The man wrote the book on diction, which they still use in every major school to this day. John used to ridicule me because I kept re-auditioning with the same piece of music because I was busy sewing and wasn't learning more stuff. But I still made my grades and I still did what I needed to get done. The other thing is, when I was at school, I made recital gowns and recital attire for everybody who was in my class or in my school. And I also worked on several different productions that were done by the musical theater people. So I still, got it done.
Before Casta Diva had a name, before the Faire booths, before corsets and coats, there was Joseph Citarella, head of wardrobe at the New York City Opera, director of period costume at the Fashion Institute of Technology, a mentor whose influence did not simply guide her, it reshaped her. During her conservatory years, Lelia also studied under Blair McCloskey, a respected vocal instructor and former speech therapist to the President John F. Kennedy. Their connection ran deeper than technique. Lelia had met Kennedy as a child through her mother's work, and McCloskey immediately recognized the discipline and curiosity that defined her. His technical approach to breadth, clarity, and resonance became a foundation she carried into both her singing and her design work. But it was Joseph Citarella who ignited the fire behind the stitch. One moment stands eternal: a pink opera dress, brought to him with pride.
What stayed with me was his instructing me that I needed to add an additional piece, because it was a 4-piece construction on the body. I needed to add a 5th because it would create a better silhouette. I also changed a few things about it that made it so that it would flex with singer's ribs, because one has to be able to expand and contract and have it never be obvious. And we learned how to do that through Joseph. And I still do that with our corsets to this day.
From that day forward, she understood design not as decoration, but as storytelling. In Anna Bolena, her mastery of silhouette captured a queen's rise and fall without a single spoken word. The velvets, sourced from immigrant-run textile shops in Northern Virginia, carried stories of resilience woven into illusions of royalty and ruin. Why was Anna Bolena such a defining production for you?
Somebody took a chance on me. And someone in such a high, prominent position took a chance on me. I could not let them down. I had to absolutely give it everything I had, and we did. And Joseph and I went fabric shopping. He came to Northern Virginia to go with me and accompanied me to all the different little places and was absolutely hand in hand with everything we did. But he took a chance on me, and I could not let him down.
In Otella, she explored the razor-thin line between structure and collapse. Each uniform promised control, yet every thread hinted at an emotional unraveling beneath the surface. With Carmen, she painted defiance in scarlet thread, a costume that demanded attention and held it. Aida brought monumental pageantry. Draped like living monuments, her designs echoed love, conflict, and destiny in every sweeping fold. Tosca was vengeance sewn in velvet. Every fold concealed intention, every line shaped the threat beneath. In Faust, she rendered temptation in fabric, where elegance masked danger, and every hemline echoed the cost of wanting more. Each design was personal. She documented them not as records, but as devotion. These were never mere costumes. They were armor. As her career deepened, she came to understand that acting was never her truest strength lived. The power was in her craft, in the precision of her hands, the discipline behind her eye, and the creative force that shaped every stitch. The stage held her voice, but the workshop held her soul. These were only glimpses, each opera a new summit, each design a quiet rebellion against gravity. And through fabric and firelight, she became a storyteller beyond words, one who believed deeply in the craft and in the tools that shaped it.
I didn't order stuff from a big box outfit and stick my name on someone else's work. It was mine. I paid my dues. I still pay my dues. Anybody worth their salt will pay their dues till they're over the Rainbow Bridge. That's how it is. And if you don't realize that, then it's on you. But I've absolutely known that from the time I was that kid, walking through the walls of 8 the Fenway at the conservatory. When I did all the other different things, I wanted to do stuff. The stuff was important to me because I always had a thing of curiosity, and somebody is always better at it than you are. And I had singers who were senior to me that I would go and hear their practice in the halls and go, damn, I want to do that. And my probably crowning moment where I realized I had to make a choice. I got tickets to major opera singer concerts. I met Marilyn Horne, I met Joan Sullivan, I met those who were my absolute idols. And I realized the chickens were coming home to roost. I wanted desperately to be Marilyn Horne, but it wasn't happening. And I had to make a choice. But if, you got it or you don't. And it's one of those things that these never let me down. So here we are. And I made that choice, and I don't regret it for one second.
It was Beverly Sills who first called her the Casta Diva Lady, a name pulled from the iconic aria in Norma. The nickname lingered, and when the time came to name her own work, The choice was effortless. Casta Diva, a name that carried history, reverence, and myth. Opera taught her how to turn music into movement, but the next act would be hers alone, a stage with no script, and an audience waiting in the lanes. What followed was not an ending, but a convergence. Casta Diva did not leave opera behind in a single moment, nor did opera ever truly leave Casta Diva. Instead, two worlds began to run side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension. And opera production and festival life merged into a single, demanding reality. By the mid-1990s, forces beyond artistry began to reshape the path forward. The government shutdown of 1995 halted funding for many opera companies overnight, leaving productions unpaid and contracts frozen. For Lelia Chamberlain, whose work depended on these institutions, the silence was sudden and destabilizing. Survival required adaptation.
I was terrified. I cannot emphasize enough. I was stone cold terrified because I knew I had a house with a mortgage, I had people to pay, I had workers that needed their pay, I had to come up with something and do it in a hurry. And I was asking everyone I knew, who did they know, come up with an idea, what can we do, because I know I got product, I could sell it, I could liquidate, I could do all kinds of stuff to scare up funds to still continue and do other things. And along comes Suzanne, one of my sewers, who says, I belong to the SCA. I have people for you. And snap, that changed my universe. We started going to kingdom level events, the coronations, I got weddings. The area around Long Island, New York saved our butt. Followed by around Baltimore and several of places that I'm trying to think of going toward Connecticut and in through East Coast. I hadn't discovered Texas yet. That would come later. But then and there, they absolutely embraced and saved our butts. Yes, I got rid of a lot of things that they kind of needed to go. A lot of my regular base customers had already seen them once, and that was when it was time to go. And we looked new because we started out all over again. And I discovered from doing this, we could keep doing that because it's a constant regeneration of income and there's a crowd to buy it when you're done. So that still exists to this day. This is why we could still do this. I have no doubt.
Yet two worlds rewarded success in a very different ways. Within the opera and entertainment industries, Casta Diva's work moved quietly, but wildly. Garments appeared in television productions, masquerade scenes, period moments, used where elegance needed to be both seen and unseen. Costumes built for stage crossed into camera work, used in shows like Guiding Lights and One Life to Live, and into editorial photography tied to major performers and productions. These moments carried prestige, they carried reach, but they were distant. Selling directly to the public was something else entirely. At festivals and SCA events, the exchange was immediate. The wearer stood in front of the maker, fittings happened face to face, garments did not appear in institutions, they became part of daily lives. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, Casta Diva lived in both realities at once. Opera productions continued, sometimes robust, sometimes sparse, while festival appearances expanded across festivals such as the Pennsylvania Ren Fair, King Richard's Fair, Florida Renaissance Fair, including the Bay Area and Brevard festivals, SCA Kingdom events, conventions, and even tent shows. It was not a clean transition. It was a logistical chaos.
We never missed a due date. In our entire history, we never missed a due date. Never. We got our stuff there in plenty of time for rehearsals. A lot of times I was even present for pack-in and whatever. And I met most of my singers who showed up at Faire in later years. And I think I've told you the funny story of the gentleman in Don Giovanni, Thomas Woodman, who came to see me at New York and then bought a corset for his wife. So we've had customers who were singers who have patronized our stores. So that's really cool. And I know a couple of his pictures are in Stitch to Stage. So it's one of those, if he sees this, hi Tom, I remember you.
Holding the balance together was a crucial figure behind the scenes. Rayanne Miller, known to many as Randy, had been Lelia's assistant since the mid-1980s. She was her collaborator and operational anchor. To much of the opera world, she was the voice on the phone, often the first point of contact, carrying the weight of scheduling, communication, and continuity. In 1997, Rayanne was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. What followed was not a single crisis, but 7 years of endurance. She continued to work whenever she could. Festivals and opera calendars bent around treatment schedules, recovery days, and caregiving realities. Rayanne had no surviving family. Lelia became her constant caregiver, employer, business partner, while still holding the business together.
It made scheduling in some cases difficult because sometimes the overlaps that occurred with the chemo, because it was the second day after chemo when the Cipro and all that stuff that goes into your body to counteract and make the things would go either haywire or not, and I had to be there. Now, we lived separately. We were very much too independent. She was my business partner in every sense, but we lived two very different lives. She did have an AA community that helped her out a lot with some stuff, but not everything, because they had lives too. And she stayed sober through all of this. And I quite frankly was concerned. I really was. But she held her promise to me, because I said, I will be there every step of the way, but you can't drink.
Support came from both worlds. Opera colleagues and festival communities alike offered help, patience, and understanding. But strain accumulates. When Rayanne passed away in 2004, something irrecoverably shifted.
Grieving is hard. I'm one of those, when I lost my dad to cancer, I went and built Bridal because I put my grieving into the next thing because it's how I chose to cope. And I've done that all of my life, and that's how I deal with stuff. And eventually it will come back and get you. The weight of trying to find anyone to take her place was crippling to me. I didn't know what to do, but I knew we had a place to go, being the Faire and so on and so forth. So I had to embrace who embraced us. So sometimes that's where you go, even though I miss the opera world and I know we can handle it just fine, and I see what we did and I know we've got better. So it's kind of one of those, I don't think it's a stretch by a long shot.
Opera didn't vanish right away. Its techniques, discipline, and identity remained alive, with future productions embedded deeply in the work. On the festival lanes, the legacy took a different form. Corsets became anchors of confidence, built with opera-era precision. Skirts and dresses carried movement and dye shaped through years of direct engagement. Legacy doublets that once appeared in her opera productions, including the Tudor-style skirted doublets, appeared as artifacts. Once they were sold, she's never remade them. What remained became archive. What emerged instead was a living craft, shaped by trust, fittings, and return patrons. Through festivals, conventions, and SCA events, a new chorus formed. Not singers, but people searching for themselves, returning year after year, wearing stories stitched into fabric. By the time the dust settled, something irreversible had taken shape. Opera was no longer the dominant stage, but it was never gone. And even if Festival Life carried the legacy forward with her line of corsets, doublets, skirts, dresses, and her ice-dyed painted diva, that traces their origins to her opera life. Unfinished ideas began to take shape. Old techniques resurfaced in new context. Dormant visions stirred. And a sense that something else was waiting, gathering quietly on the horizon. The opera stage taught Lelia Chamberlain how to sculpt emotion into form, how to turn music into silhouettes, and fabric into feeling. It taught discipline, precision, how a single theme can change how a story breathes. But those lessons did not belong only to the stage. They traveled past the proscenium, past the velvet ropes, into festival dust, into the streets where legends still walk. Because even when the show ends, the costume remembers. In 2025, on the cusp of 4 decades of artistry, something stirred again. The reawakening of language. The opera revival line was born, not as a step forward, but as a synthesis. A meeting point where the grandeur of the stage met the hard-earned freedom of the streets and festival life. Where gardens once designed for distant audiences were shaped for bodies in motion. The Gabriels were never conceived as fashion statements. They were born from motion, from combat, from breath, from the necessity of movement on stage. Both of their foundations, the Costanza and the Robin, began as fencing doublets designed for operatic productions where performers did not simply pose, but fought, advanced, retreated, turned, and survived in real time beneath stage lights. These were garments built for bodies in action. The Gabriel Vandelay traces its lineage to the Costanza, a fencing doublet designed by Lelia Baron Chamberlain for stage combat, and informed by her own training in fencing. The Costanza was never ornamental. Its lines were deliberate, its balance intentional. It was engineered to allow full freedom of the shoulders, controlled protection through the torso, and uninterrupted movement through strikes, parries, and turns. The DNA remains unmistakably in the Vandelay. The Gabriel androgynous descends from the Robin, whose origins also lie in fencing and rapid stage performance. Over time, structure evolved. Bones replaced illusions, grommets replaced concealment, the Robin emerged, and from it, the Gabriel androgynous. A garment shaped not by gender, but by motion. Both Gabriels carry the same intent. They are designed to move, to fight, to dance, to breathe. They are garments built for all bodies, across all identities, shaped by the belief that clothing should never restrict expression, only support it. The silhouettes do not dictate who the wearer must be. They make space for who the wearer already is.
I wanted something that I had the confidence, I knew it was going to work, regardless of what we did, and making a change on it means it's like coming up with a new edition of a Silverado truck. We came up with a new cool thing, and it became a must-have to our devoted followers, and they were flattering. The thing that sells it was a thing that I learned from watching stage combat. The other thing is, I didn't mention any of this, at the conservatory, I learned how to fence. And our doublet, our Robin and our Costanza are in fact real, genuine, to this day, fencing doublets. You can, that's the reason we do all of our stuff on our videos with sword fighting. That's because that's our roots. I did that in school. way the hell back long before Casta Diva was ever born. They are fencing doublets, and I had my SCA people go through, and they're all looking for a reason to find a fault with what you do so they can buy it for me for $1. And that didn't happen because mine were real. And it was kind of cool.
Some shapes never truly disappear. The captain's coats, once familiar on the opera stage, return here not as costume, but as presence. Authority without armor, drama without excess. They carry memory in their seams and confidence in their cut. Reintroduced not because they were gone, but because the world was ready to see them differently.
It changed my world because I saw the real stuff. We then progressed to the fact that as a kid, my dad took us every summer to Williamsburg. Dad specialized in building custom houses. So you go to Williamsburg, what are you doing? You're looking at people running around wearing the buckle shoes and the whole bit. Up close and personal, when you go eat, Brunswick stew at this or that or the other place, who serves you? Somebody wearing one of those coats, but not quite as fancy. But you get to see the real stuff, the old stuff, and you're looking at it and how did they do that? And it's the reason for why my coats have the pleat in the back that is a functioning, it opens. Your sword goes out the back and they move. And when you twirl, we watch combat on stage, they move. They absolutely, you can do anything, you can do jumping jacks, you can do backflips, you can do whatever you want to do. It is absolutely free movement. And that's our secret to our success.
And then, something new stepped forward. The Spell Weaver, born from myth, shaped by elegance, and touched with the faintest whisper of arcane. It floats like memory, moves like incantation.
It's evolved from going to things like Dragon Con and, again, watching people who portray different things. It's not so much an opera thing as it is, I see the next direction of where this particular kind of business can go. And it could be used in a movie format, because you too can work and move in that as well. It's got every bit of the qualities, but unless somebody changes a format, opera speaking, because there is so much tradition in opera, and I personally think it's a more forward-thinking piece. I mean, I can think of a million ways for how it can become Cruella de Vil. We've had all kinds of different people thrown as suggestions. The thing that is holding it back is the price, because it takes lots of time to do with the split colors in the skirt, but it's the split colors in the skirt that give it the definition, and it is in fact built on a fully boned bodice. I mean, a fully boned corset, not a bodice, but a fully boned corset. And it's built on a Gracie, which is already in our website. But the Gracie evolved after I got the answer from my customer base that wanted something with a shoulder to it, but wanted it to have more of a corseted feel. And that's why they are different than the Costanza.
In every stitch, echoes remain. Anna's crown, Carmen's fire, Mephistopheles' waltz. And now, new stories join the chorus. These garments are not relics. They are living myths. Each thread an invitation, each piece a chance to step into your own legend. And so the work stands. Not finished, not abandoned, not yet answered. What comes next is not certainty, it is a question. If the world has changed, if the opera stage has shifted, if the tools, the voices, and the paths forward are different now, then the only thing left to ask is simple. If we build it again, will they come?